Merry Christmas and welcome to The King in Giallo. I'm Tanner Leeser, and for this holiday season I wanted to do something special. If you are new to this channel, welcome. I mostly cover giallo films wherein I have a point system of genre cliches I look for in each giallo as I review them, which all get added up at the end and ranked how cliched the films are. These points don't matter. This is all just for fun. Now, sometimes I run this system through movies which are in no way giallo films, just for shits and giggles. These videos are called How Giallo Is, followed by the title. For this special episode, I will be looking at the 1974 proto-slasher Black Christmas, directed by the man who would try to redeem himself by bringing us A Christmas Story. Before I go any further, I must restate again for the gatekeepers that Black Christmas is not a giallo film and never has been, and I am not trying to deceive you into thinking it is. But all of you knew that. It's fucking stupid that I even have to say this. But let's jump right into it. Here is How Giallo Is Black Christmas. Black Christmas is a 1974 Canadian proto-slasher film. The film is directed by Bob Clark, written by Roy Moore. Music is composed by Carl Zittrer. The cast is comprised of Olivia Hussey as Jess, Keir Dalia as Peter, Margot Kidder as Barb, John Saxon as Lieutenant Kenneth Fuller, Marion Waldman as Mrs. Mack, Andrea Martin as Phyllis or Phil, James Edmond as Mr. Harrison, Douglas McGrath as Sergeant Nash, Art Hindle as Chris Hayden, and Lynn Griffin as Claire Harrison. The plot of the film follows a group of sorority sisters during the Christmas season as they are targeted by an unseen assailant. The film begins with a disturbing phone call to the sorority house from an anonymous caller the women have already nicknamed the Moaner. The calls escalate to threats of violence, which are initially dismissed as a prank. However, events take a dark turn when one of the sisters mysteriously disappears. Her father, concerned about her absence, teams up with the sorority and the local police to investigate. Meanwhile, Jess, one of the sisters, struggles with her own personal conflict involving her boyfriend, Peter, who reacts poorly to her decision to have an abortion. As the investigation unfolds, the group is drawn into a tense and terrifying situation when it's revealed that the phone calls may be coming from inside the house. The screenplay for Black Christmas, initially titled Stop Me, was inspired by the urban legend The Babysitter and the Man Upstairs, and a series of murders in Montreal's Westmount neighborhood. Moore's original script was adapted to a university setting by producers Harvey Sherman and Richard Schutten. Bob Clark further refined it by incorporating humor and realistic depictions of young adults. The film was shot in Toronto with a budget of approximately $686,000 and distributed by Warner Brothers, grossing $4.05 million worldwide. Upon release, Black Christmas received mixed reviews, but has since been re-evaluated as one of the earliest slasher films. It influenced later genre staples, notably John Carpenter's Halloween, 1978, and is recognized for its ambiguous storytelling and suspenseful use of POV shots. The film also bears a thematic resemblance to giallo cinema, particularly in its combination of psychological horror, a shadowy killer, and stylish camera work. John Saxon, who played Lieutenant Fuller, had previously starred in Mario Bava's The Girl Who Knew Too Much, 1963, widely regarded as the first giallo film. A novelization of the film by Lee Hayes was published in 1976. Black Christmas initiated a franchise, later remade in 2006 and 2019, but let's not talk about that. Bob Clark sought to create a horror film that depicted college students with authenticity. Olivia Hussey, cast as Jess, joined the project after a psychic predicted its success. Margot Kidder played Barb, a brash sorority sister, while John Saxon replaced Edmund O'Brien as the police lieutenant due to O'Brien's health issues. The film's chilling musical score was achieved through unconventional methods, such as distorting piano sounds by tying objects to the strings. The phone calls, integral to the film's tension, were voiced by multiple actors, including Nick Mancuso and Bob Clark, with Mancuso improvising and contorting his body to achieve a disturbing vocal quality. Cinematic techniques like the killer's POV shots further heightened the sense of dread. Despite studio suggestions to alter its ambiguous ending for the US release, Clark insisted on preserving the open-ended conclusion, contributing to the film's enduring legacy in the horror genre. But let's segue to the review and GialliTally portion of the video. Spoilers ahead for those of you who haven't yet seen the film. You've been warned. My prediction for the movie's GialliTally score. I don't anticipate a lot of the staple cliches being seen, and this isn't a particularly sleazy movie. I reckon most points will probably come from the kills. I'll say in the ballpark of 400 to 450 points. Well, let's begin the GialliTally and review portion of the video, beginning as always with the previewing cliches. The repeat offenders are 1 point for actor, 3 for writer, 3 for composer, and 5 for director. Now usually I skip this section for the non-giallo films as there is nothing to award, but this film is different. John Saxon was in The Girl Who Knew Too Much, 1 point. Cliche points for the title, Black Christmas, contains a color, 5 points. And would you look at that, it is plot o'clock. The film opens with the title card and an establishing shot of the sorority house, accompanied by a choir version of Silent Night. Soon enough, that name will be associated with a completely different Christmas classic. We follow a sister inside as the camera takes on this voyeuristic style without explicitly implying that someone is watching. Z is for zoom, 5 points. Okay, now it does. First person POV, 5 points. The unseen man breathes heavily as he stalks outside. They linger into frame. Killer's identity is hidden due to framing and editing, 2 points. The front door was left open, but the prowler is still outside. Did they enter and leave, or is one of the sisters a bit sloppy? They observe a tall trellis scaling the wall, a means to get in. They start climbing. This is Barb. She has a Christmas event planned for the little kids. The phone rings. T is for telephone, 5 points. Jess answers. She shouts over the commotion inside, trying to hear who is calling. Y is for yelling, 5 points. The call is for Barb, who takes it in the other room. We watch the prowler sneak into the attic space and push deeper inside the house. From this location, they now have full access right into the sorority house, and they descend down. Barb's mom is calling, whom she informs of her plans for heading home in the near future. There is apparent drama. Sounds like mom will be having a fellow over, and so Barb says that she'll invite some friends along so she can go skiing and not be alone. This is Claire, who sees her boyfriend Chris out. Sounds like she'll be spending more time with him over the break. She mentions introducing him to her father. Barb hangs up and asks the girls if anyone wants to come skiing for a few days. They say yes, except for Claire, who has made plans already. The phone rings again. It's the Moaner, a pervert who has apparently been calling and harassing the girls for some time. They gather around. His calls are evidently getting more complicated, as it now sounds like numerous people are on the other line. The man babbles incoherently in different voices before aggressively oinking and grunting like a pig. The call devolves into vulgarity. Typical 1970s Italian misogyny. Woman is sexually assaulted, 7 points. Pause here. Now, I wasn't sure whether to add this or not, but after doing a Google search, which I'm sure has put me on a watch list now, the consensus of whether obscene phone calls qualifies as sexual assault is kind of up in the air, but certainly it can warrant criminal charges in some states. I will grant it. Barb takes the phone and tells the caller off. After a back and forth of sexually obscene demands versus f*** yous, the caller ends with,
"I'm going to kill you."
Let's quickly add extra points for T is for telephone for the killer making a call, 5 more points, and extra points for Y is for yelling for a hysterical woman yelling, 5 more points. Again, I might be jumping the gun on that one, but it'll be justified later in the movie. Please answer me! The phone call has everyone on edge. Claire warns it's not wise to provoke such a person and reminds all about a townie who was assaulted recently, but Barb irreverently states that you can't assault a townie. This sentiment bothers Claire, who leaves to pack. Jess tries to assuage tensions, but Claire asserts that she's fine. Barb brushes off Jess's admonishment, declaring, "I know a professional virgin when I see one." There's someone at the door. It's Mrs. Mack, the house mother, holding a handful of presents. Claire enters her room and loves on her puss. Animals featured. Pet cat, 2 points. Claire goes to the closet but doesn't notice the plastic moving from someone's breathing. She wisens up soon enough and approaches the closet, unsure if it's her cat, Claude. The terror here on the performer is genuine. The killer strikes. The plastic is wrapped around Claire. Downstairs, the girls circle around Mrs. Mack and implore her to try on her Christmas gift. F is for fashion, either to Mrs. Mack's coat or to Jess's sweater. 5 points. We watch the killer's shadow as he carries off Claire and disappears up the attic. The girls disperse, and Mack retrieves a hidden bottle of booze from a book and chugs most of the sherry. She hides the bottle before getting caught. She thanks Jess for how wonderfully all the girls treat her. The phone rings again. It's Jess's boyfriend, Peter. She discusses needing to talk to him later about something. He bluntly tells her that he hasn't been to bed in 3 days and to just come out with it, but she insists it will have to wait for person to person. He apologizes, and they agree to talk later. We cut to Mac brushing her teeth before stopping and retrieving a second bottle of sherry hidden in the toilet tank. Jess checks on Claire, who doesn't respond. We cut to her rocking in the attic with the plastic still wrapped over her face. Evidence seen being hidden may include a body. 5 points. A creepy voice sings a nursery rhyme or lullaby as we fade to an exterior shot of a church steeple. We pan down to an older man as he waits. Urban locales, 2 points. The man is pelted by a snowball. A younger man approaches and apologizes for his unruly students. The older man asks for help. His daughter Claire is late and he wonders if the young man knows anything. Q is for questions. 5 points. The young man agrees to show the father where the sorority house is. Cut to the Christmas charity event spoken of earlier as tensions over the coming break begin to bubble. C is for children, 5 points. Cut again, Mrs. Mack tells Mr. Harrison that he might find his daughter over at the charity event the girls are putting on. Mr. Harrison voices displeasure at the decorum of the sorority house. N is for nudity, 5 points. Hippies, 2 points. In his daughter's room, Mr. Harrison inquires about a young man in a photo whom Mrs. Mack says is Chris Hayden, Claire's wonderful boyfriend. Well, this is news to Mr. Harrison. He warns that he did not send his daughter here for drinking and boys, but Matt confirms that Claire is a good girl. She asks if he's going to swing by the frat house to check for Claire and if he wouldn't mind giving her a lift. He agrees. As Mac freshens up, she hears Claire's cat, Claude. She tries to call the cat out, but Mr. Harrison is ready to go. They leave, unaware that Claire is right there. We cut now to Jess telling Peter that she is pregnant, but despite his joyfulness, she relays that she doesn't want it and plans to have an abortion. Peter becomes very upset and calls Jess selfish. He dismisses her, but requests to see her later tonight, despite Jess saying there's nothing more for them to discuss. She reluctantly agrees to meet later. We find Mr. Harrison on the phone with his wife as Barb gives alcohol to a child in the background. Okay. The phone rings and Jess rushes to answer it. We hear the moaner as he shifts between voices, crying out, "Billy! What your mother and I must know is, where did you put the baby? What your mother and I must know is, Billy!" The girls and Mr. Harrison are at the police station reporting the disappearance and the caller. The officer tells them to calm down. Typical 1970s Italian misogyny, woman is gaslit, 4 points, and woman is told to shut up, 2 points. This is Sergeant Nash, who tells Mr. Harrison that he is free to continue to file the missing persons report if he wants, but 90% of the time, a missing sorority girl is off somewhere with a boy. Jess lets Mac inside. There's a quick line about the door needing to be fixed, call back to earlier when the door didn't close, before Jess informs Mac about the caller. Mac tells Jess about Claire not meeting her father earlier. She searches for more hidden sherry. We return to the station for this bit, where the officer asks for the sorority house number, and Barb says this.
It's Fellatio 20880. Fellatio. It's a new exchange. F-E.
It's a new one on me. How do you spell it?
Useless police or comedic police, 2 points. Cut to Friday the 13th, part 3. Jess finds Chris playing hockey and asks him where Claire is. She tells him what happened today with the police and that they said that she must be shacked up somewhere. Exposition dumping, 2 points. Peter is performing. Art featured, music, piano playing, 5 points. The judges seem unimpressed. Peter seems to be fighting demons inside. A grieving mother tells Lieutenant Fuller here that her little girl has not come home recently. Just then, Chris and Jess storm into the police station. Chris tells off Sergeant Nash and presses Lieutenant Ken Fuller on why the disappearance of his girlfriend is not being taken seriously. He gets right on it. Back at the sorority house, Mr. Harrison is worrying, but Barb tells him about a species of turtles that can screw for 3 days straight. Thanks, Barb. She blabbers on, causing all to become uncomfortable before she is told off by Mac and Phyllis, who both remind Barb that she is drunk. Cut to Peter destroying his piano. Chris arrives to the house and meets Claire's father, and they all go out, except for Mrs. Mac. Mac tells Phyllis that she'll be going to her sister's for the holiday, and so she might not be there upon everyone's return. The police have gathered a group of volunteers to help comb the park for signs of the missing little girl and Claire. Next, we see a young man approach the sorority house. Mac is alone inside, or is she? As she packs, she swigs from her, fifth bottle of sherry? Claude the cat has found Claire's body in the attic. Mac's ride is here, but she suddenly overhears Claude mewling. She follows the sounds up into the attic. Once at the top, we are met with a terrifying sight: Mrs. Mac's brown teeth. Ugh. The killer lies in wait, clutching a crane hook. Just then, Mrs. Mac spies the dead body of Claire. Extra points for Z is for zoom for both a zoom on a weapon and a zoom on a dead body. 5 plus 5, 10 points. She turns and faces the killer, and the hook is hurled at her. Mac is yanked up into the attic. The cabbie is at the front door trying to reach someone, but after a few moments, he leaves. The killer begins acting absolutely insane, a mixture of hyper remorse and anger. I don't know. Someone babbles, 2 points. Jess leaves the search to meet Peter. Someone screams out. The party gathers and discovers the body of the missing girl. Extra points for C is for children for a child being killed. Another 5 points. The phone rings again. It is the killer, who screams like a crying baby. Extra points for Z is for zoom for a slow zoom on eyes. 5 more points. And E is for eyeballs. 5 points. Jess hangs up again and searches for Mrs. Mac. Jess dials the phone as we see someone's shadow descend the stairs behind her. Jess requests to report the obscene phone calls and is put on a brief hold. The figure closes in. It's Peter. He says he was sleeping upstairs, but her screaming woke him up. She tells him about Claire being missing. Peter reveals that he's upset by Jess's decision from earlier. Over with Sergeant Nash now, he relays to Jess that the police department has been a little busy tonight with the recent body discovered in the park and asks her if she's tried calling the phone company. He tells her it's probably someone's boyfriend playing a joke and that he is unable to get an officer over there anytime soon. Mr. Harrison is disgusted by the incompetence of the police department here. Jess tells Peter of the missing girl found murdered. Peter changes the subject. He is leaving the conservatory. He says he's been there for 8 years and he's tired of the lifestyle. He says after which they are getting married. Jess reminds him of her own dreams and aspirations, which she still holds onto. She says that doesn't go away just because he's changed his plans. She tells him point blank she does not want to marry him. He accepts this with dignity, then asks, what about the baby? We cut to the police department, where Fuller all but chastises Nash for not taking the reports or the threatening phone calls seriously in the midst of a girl being discovered murdered. They leave. Fuller finds the joke set up by Barb and asks to speak with Nash, who is woefully oblivious to the word's meaning and the fact that the girl played a prank on him. Perhaps if the telephone code was prefix cunnilingus for CNG. Peter is holding back outrage. He curses Jess for her decision, calling her selfish again.
You're talking about killing our baby as though you were having a wart removed.
He threatens that she will not kill his baby and storms out. Peter draws the attention of Lieutenant Fuller. Fuller meets with Jess and receives her express permission to put a wiretap on the phone for future obscene calls. The lines are set up. Fuller inspects Claire's room. G is for gloves, extra points for them being black, 10 points. He asks about Claire possibly seeing another boy, but this theory is rejected. They decree that Claire was emotionally stable, did not drink much, and was last seen by Jess yesternight. Fuller is given a list of phone numbers so he can contact the girls who have already headed out for the break. The phone line is set up to also call the police department, but they will need to keep the caller on the line for the machine to do its magic. Lastly, Fuller points out that an officer is sitting outside in a patrol car watching over the house. The police leave as we observe Peter hiding outside the house. Phyllis breaks down from all the stress. She reveals that she's been taking pills for her cold and they make her more tired. She asks to be excused to go to bed and Jess obliges. Character takes prescription pills or sedatives, 5 points. Let's also do set in a manor or chateau, and extra points if a group of friends are there for the duration. Sure, I'm bending this cliche a bit, but it's mostly set here, and it's a big house. 10 points. The phone is nearly finished. Fuller's phone has been set up so that it will only receive the calls going to the sorority house. The killer is still upstairs. Jess waits by the phone, as does Fuller. The killer descends from the attic. Jess hears the floors creak upstairs. In this next room, the killer enters and stands over Barb as she sleeps. Jess is alarmed by the sound of Barb wheezing from an asthma attack. She takes a few hits from her inhaler, calms down a bit, and reports to Jess that she had a nightmare of a bedroom intruder.
He's climbing in your windows, he's snatching your people up, trying to rape them, so y'all need to hide your kids, hide your wife, and hide your husband because they're raping everybody out here.
The killer watches the two women from the shadows. The sound of children outside caroling, "O come, all ye faithful," is heard. This pulls Jess out, who watches them, allowing the killer to slip back into the room. The killer, who refers to himself as Billy, whispers to Barb, calling her Agnes. He grabs Laura Wingfield's favorite figure, the unicorn, and raises it overhead, revealing the killer to be Jim O'Connor. I'm sorry. Let's see if I can squeeze one more Tennessee Williams joke in here. Billy plunges the figure into Barb, stabbing her repeatedly. The children outside drown out the struggle upstairs as Barb breaks the rest of the glass menagerie. All right, there you go. I'm done. I'm not proud of those, but I couldn't not try. A woman summons the children to get into the car. I hope they have a clown car. The woman warns Jess about the murder in the park, but she's well aware. The phone begins ringing. The call is picked up at the station. Jess answers the phone. The killer makes more unpleasant sounds, playing out a scene between two people. The call is trying to be located as Fuller listens in. The killer then repeats something Peter had said to Jess.
Just like having a wart removed.
Jess exclaims, "Oh my God." The line goes dead before it can be traced. Fuller calls and tells Jess that they need more time on the call to complete the trace. The killer watches. Fuller asks if Jess recognized something when she said, "Oh my God," but she says no. L is for lies, 5 points. Fuller asks Jess about the young man who stormed out earlier today. She says that was her boyfriend, but before he can get an answer about whether the two had had a fight, a commotion at the station interrupts them. He asks to call back. Jess and Phil are discussing the recent call and why Jess didn't confess to recognizing something Peter had said. Jess says it might all just be a coincidence. They check and confirm that the cop car is still outside. The phone rings again. Fuller listens in. It's Peter. He is weeping and pleading for Jess to help him. They begin a trace of the new call. Peter begs for Jess to not kill the baby, then hangs up. Again, the call is too short. Fuller calls the house again and asks Jess about what Peter meant by killing the baby. She confesses to the predicament she's in and how she had told Peter earlier today. Fuller advises that Peter get help. Jess reports that Peter was present with her when one of the calls came through. A is for alibi, 5 points. Jess tells Fuller where he can find Peter, and he once again advises her to keep the caller on longer. The police plan on expanding their search in the area and will have volunteers go house to house. The girls are startled by the search party doing their rounds. The party leaves, then Jess informs Phil that this door here is the only door in the entire house that is locked. Fuller tells Nash to call the dean and to pull all records on Peter. As Phil locks up, Barb's door shuts. Phil goes to check up on her, but once inside the room, the door shuts behind her. At the concert hall where Peter plays, Fuller finds the piano smashed. We watch the killer dial again. The phone rings. Jess answers, and the killer starts up again. More gibberish about a baby. The call is traced. Fuller is informed of the new call. The trace is complete. Nash is given the address of the caller. The killer hangs up. Fuller is radioed by Nash of the address. the sorority house. But being the doofus that Nash is, Fuller believes him to be mistaken by the address of where the calls are coming into, not coming from. But Nash asserts indeed that they are coming from the same house. Odd clue. 5 points. Fuller radios the officer on guard, but we discover he has his throat slit. Fuller tells Nash to call Jess and to not scare the girls, but to inform them to walk outside and he'll be there in 5 minutes. Jess calls out to Phil, but the phone rings. She answers, and Nash asks if she's alone, and she says 2 other girls are asleep upstairs. Nash tells Jess to walk out of the house, but when she mentions going to get the other girls, Nash panics and orders her not to. He spills the beans. The calls are coming from inside the house. He commands her to not go upstairs, to leave immediately. Extra points for Q is for questions being yelled. 5 more points. Jess goes to the door and calls out to the girls. She becomes hysterical. She arms herself with a fireplace poker and ascends the stairs. She approaches Barb's door. It's locked, and so she barges in. Inside are the bodies of Barb and Phil. Jess hears,
Agnes, it's me, Billy. Agnes, don't you tell what we did, Agnes.
and finds an evil eye staring at her from behind the door. She shoves the door into the killer and runs. The killer comes out. Foot chase. 5 points. Jess goes to the front door but cannot unlock it in time. The killer grabs her, but they both stumble. Jess runs into the basement and locks the door. The killer tries to break through. Close up on a door lock. 5 points. And then suddenly... nothing. Silence, except for the killer's footsteps leaving. Jess descends further into the basement. The police scramble to the house. Jess spies a man's shadow outside searching for a way in. The man approaches the basement door and calls out to her. It's Peter. He breaks the glass and steps inside. He calls to Jess, then finds her cowering in the dark. As he edges closer, he asks why she wasn't answering and what she's doing down here. The police arrive, find the cop's body, then burst into the house upon hearing Jess's screams from within. In the basement, they find Peter and Jess. Peter is dead. Jess awakens. Woman outmuscles a man. 15 points. We cut to Jess resting in bed. Fuller, Chris, and Mr. Harrison discuss Peter being the killer. Nash tells Fuller their facility cannot accommodate this many corpses and that reporters are outside. Fuller tells Nash to get them out of here. Now, we can't see them, but because we can clearly hear them, I will graciously add R is for reporters. 5 points. Mr. Harrison passes out from shock and is assisted out of the room. Everybody leaves. Jess's lights are turned off, and she is left alone in the f***ing house. We get one more POV shot which tracks throughout the house. The camera ascends the stairs where we hear floorboards creak and someone, the killer, making noises. In the attic are the undiscovered bodies of Mac, Claire, and Billy. The camera pulls out of the window, showing Claire's propped body visible for all to see, as it has been the entire time. As a cop stands guard outside, we hear the phone ring a final time as the credits roll. Let's stop and add some final cliches. Mistaken identity of the killer, 5 points. O is for obsession, extra points for the killer being obsessed, 10 points. And S is for secrets. Since we never learn who the killer is or what their true MO is, we'll reserve this cliche for Jess being pregnant, although she was forced to tell a few people. 5 points. And that's Black Christmas. So I'm going to wing this one. I actually didn't write anything for my thoughts. I thought I would just fire. I really like this movie. This is a classic. This is one of those perfect stepping stone films of leading up to slasher films. But what's crazy is that giallo films are a thing currently in this year. This is a year before Deep Red came out. And I wouldn't go so far as to claim that Black Christmas was strongly influenced by giallo films, but I think Bob Clark probably saw a few. Even if he didn't, it's not like slasher and horror doesn't have a legacy of film leading up to this movie. But regardless, my thoughts on this, I love this movie. I saw it for the first time fairly recently. I want to say about maybe 5 years ago. I think this is the best iteration of the calls are coming from inside the house, and it's just so amazing to me that Bob Clark has made my favorite Christmas movie, and he made Black Christmas also, which is not my favorite Christmas movie, but it's definitely the best holiday slasher. I would say that. I don't think there is a Christmas time. I don't think there is a Christmas time or holiday slasher that even compares. The only other one would be Halloween, which, funny enough, Halloween is very much inspired by Black Christmas. But yes, this film is a classic. If you're a horror fan, you should see this. If you are a slasher fan, you must see this. And as a Giallo fan, check it out if you haven't. Let's segue to the GialliTally cliches for this movie. Post-Giallo viewing cliches. The reason for the killing. Now, we're not sure. Either psychological trauma or mental illness, psychopathy, or obsession. But both categories equal the same. So, 7 points. The reason for the investigation. Police investigator. 2 points. Bonus points. The style bonus. The movie is stylish and gorgeous, perfectly combining the allure of Christmas movies and the vibe of slasher and horror. The contrast between the color of the Christmas lights and the darkness is so well balanced. The colored lights have this frosted look. We have some zoom ins, there's like a crash zoom out, there's slow motion, a few crazy opticals because of the glass, there's fades, usage of shadows, and some of the greatest first-person POVs. It never drifts into full-on Giallo style, but it's certainly up there for a slasher. And it's amazing how like the earliest slashers were the most stylistic. Out of a max of 25 points possible, I will give Black Christmas 15 points for its style bonus. Soundtrack.
Little baby bunting, daddy's gone a-hunting. Where did you put Agnes, Billy?
Look, I'm telling you, you have the wrong number.
I know what you did, Billy! Filthy Billy! 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 Billy!
Stop this.
Jess, get up! And don't go up there! Don't go upstairs, Jess!
Sadly, no. Like Friday the 13th, this is a phenomenal through and through horror soundtrack. No points. Bad effects. Again, the effects are great. No points. Final look. Extra points. The Deadpool, tallying how many kills and deaths are featured in the film. I break it down as thus: 10 points per kill or death scene for the main Deadpool, plus any stylistic kill multipliers, which we didn't add yet, plus the knife kill bonus. We have Claire. She's suffocated with plastic, but I'll say strangled with an object. 13 points. Mrs. Mack. Again, unsure if she is bludgeoned with the hook or if it hooks into her flesh, but I'll go with bludgeoned. 15 points. Barb. Impaled. 16 points. Phil. We don't know how, so 10 points. Officer Jennings. Throat slit. 17 points. And Peter. Based on the head trauma, let's say he was probably bludgeoned with that fireplace poker. 15 points. Extended Deadpool for those other deaths mentioned but not seen. I'll give 3 points for each. We have Janice, the girl found in the park. And we don't see anything, so 3 points. Now, what about Agnes? Well, is that even real? We don't know. So I can't add it for that. Red herrings for the total number of legitimate suspects in the film. 5 points per legit suspect are awarded. We have Peter and this mysterious Billy person, 10 points. Honestly, the movie doesn't give us any more red herrings other than that. I mean, I could expand this to include some wild theories like, oh, maybe Chris suspected Claire of having another guy on the side, but I think that would just be silly. There's no evidence for that. Flashback sequences, 5 points each. We have none. Nudity, I award 5 points for ass, 7 for breasts, and 10 for genitalia. We have ass and ass. 10 points for nudity. Ladies and gentlemen, for Black Christmas, I awarded the film an AZ score of 14 out of 26. With the bonus points for these, we have a modified score total of 115 points. And for the full GialliTally score, I award Black Christmas a GialliTally score of 346 points. Compared to Short Night of Glass Dolls in first with 968 points, The Case of the Bloody Iris in second with 830 points, and Slaughter Hotel in third with 827 points, Black Christmas would be near the bottom, above only The Telephone and The Possessed. But compared to the non-Gialli, Friday the 13th Part 5 A New Beginning in first with 685 points, Cruising in second with 469 points, and The Mannequin in Red in third with 412 points, Black Christmas would be at the bottom of the non-Gialli films covered. I predicted 400 to 450, and I was way off. I expected some of the slashery aspects to carry it a bit more, but this just goes to show you that these two genres of film are very, very different. But like I say, these points do not mean a movie is better or worse. Thank you for watching. Please like this video, share it with your friends if they are horror fans or cinephiles, subscribe to The King in Giallo if you haven't yet, and if you have any questions, thoughts, curiosities, or concerns, leave those below in the comments section, and I will get back to you. Give The King in Giallo a follow on Instagram, maybe a like on Facebook, subscribe to The King in Giallo Patreon to see early access, plus exclusive content found only there, and to have your name in the patron panel. Next time on The King in Giallo will be the final video of the year. How Giallo is Maxine. Thank you very much for your continued support here. This is Tanner Leeser for The King in Giallo, and if nothing else, I'll see you next time.
I know. Something dirty, ain't it?